Hello and welcome. If you're like me, you've invited certain people into your home for decades, not as guests, but as part of the family. Their morning chatter is the soundtrack to your coffee, their laughter a familiar comfort. For millions, Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos have been that couple, a beacon of vivacious energy and a seemingly unshakable partnership. Their love story, which began on a soap opera set, felt like a real-life fairy tale. But what happens when the fairy tale is interrupted by a knock on the door from the one thing you never invited? Reality. A reality so stark, it threatens to shatter the very glass slipper. Today, we're not just talking about a headline, we're going behind the glossy facade of celebrity and into the heart of a human experience that, at its core, resonates with every single one of us who has loved, feared, or faced a tomorrow that felt uncertain. This is a story about a diagnosis, yes, but more importantly, it's a story about the quiet, ferocious strength that emerges when life demands it. So, settle in. This might not be the story you expect, but it may be the one you need to hear. The day began like any other in their sun-drenched New York apartment. The city's hum was a distant orchestra, and the routine was a well-worn dance. Kelly, ever the dynamo, was likely mapping out the day's schedule. Mark, the steady anchor, was probably reading the paper. But then the phone rang. It wasn't a loud, clanging ring, but in the memory of that day, it would forever echo like a gong. It was a call from the doctor's office. Mark had been for some routine tests, the kind we're all encouraged to do at a certain age, the kind we schedule with a sense of dutiful boredom, never truly believing they will yield anything but a clean bill of health. He took the call in his study, closing the door. Kelly remembers the silence that followed. It was a silence that grew, swelling to fill the entire apartment, pushing the air out of the rooms. When Mark emerged, his face, usually so expressive and warm, was a mask of composed shock. He didn't cry. He didn't fall to his knees. He simply looked at the woman he had loved since he was 25, and in his eyes, she saw the landscape of their future shift irrevocably. The news was a rare progressive neurological condition, not immediately life-threatening, but a thief in the night, one that threatened to slowly steal his coordination, his balance, the very physicality that was so intrinsic to who he was. He explained it calmly, clinically, as if trying to armor her against the blow by making it sound manageable. But Kelly Ripa, the woman who shares everything with her audience, was in that moment utterly alone with her husband and this terrifying new vocabulary. The world, for a moment, went completely still, and then it shattered. Now, if this were a movie, this is the point where the music would swell dramatically and the scene would fade to black. But life isn't a movie. The credits don't roll. The next scene is the hardest one of all, the after. What do you do when the unthinkable becomes your Tuesday? For Kelly and Mark, the days that followed were a fog of whispered conversations and forced normalcy for their children. Kelly later described it as feeling like she was watching her own life from the outside, through a pane of thick, distorted glass. She was shattered, yes. But have you ever looked closely at a piece of shattered glass? In the right light, it doesn't just represent brokenness. Each fragment is a tiny, sharp, brilliant prism, capable of reflecting light in a million new directions. And that is precisely what happened next, because just when Kelly felt she was at her most broken, a memory, long forgotten, surfaced from the depths of her mind. A memory of her own father, and a lesson he taught her about fixing what seems irreparably broken. It was a Saturday morning in the 1970s. A young Kelly, all of 8 or 9, had been chasing her brother through the house when she knocked her father's prize ship in the bottle from the mantelpiece. It hit the hearth with a sickening crunch. The beautiful, intricate vessel was in 100 pieces. She was hysterical, expecting a scolding, but her father, a bus driver named Joe Ripa, didn't yell. He sat down on the floor amongst the wreckage, put his arm around her and said, "Okay, Kel, first we breathe. Then we see what we can save." For hours, they sat there. He didn't try to hide the cracks. Instead, he showed her the Japanese art of kintsugi, a concept he'd read about, where broken pottery is repaired with lacquer dusted with gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy is profound. The breakage and repair become part of the object's history, making it more beautiful, more unique, and more valuable for having been broken. Sitting in her New York apartment 50 years later, Kelly looked at her husband, at their life, at the sharp, painful pieces of their new reality scattered around them, and she remembered her father's lesson. They couldn't wish this diagnosis away. They couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. But maybe, just maybe, they could gather the pieces and start the slow, patient work of rebuilding. They could fill the cracks with something stronger than fear. They could fill them with love, with resilience, with a renewed commitment to every single moment. This wasn't about going back to the way things were. That ship had sailed. This was about building something new, something even more beautiful with the cracks. But embracing this philosophy would require a courage they weren't sure they had, and a decision that would leave their closest friends and the entire world utterly stunned. The public first sensed something was amiss not from a tearful interview, but from a silence. Kelly was uncharacteristically absent from live for a week. The official reason was a family matter. Mark's vibrant social media presence went dark. The paparazzi photos showed them looking drawn, holding hands a little tighter as they walked, their faces etched with a new, sober gravity. The rumor mill churned. Was it marital trouble? Problems with one of their children? The speculation was a low, constant hum in the background of the entertainment news cycle. Then they made a decision that shocked everyone. Instead of retreating into total privacy, they chose to confront the narrative head-on, but on their own terms. They weren't ready for a sit-down with a journalist. Not yet. Instead, they did something far more powerful. They went on a long-planned family vacation, and they allowed a single, unposed photo to be taken. It was a picture of them on a boat off the coast of Maine. Mark was at the helm, squinting into the sun, a faint, determined smile on his face. Kelly was beside him, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand on his back. They weren't hiding. They were living. The photo spoke volumes. It said, "We are still here. We are still us. And we are fighting this. Together." This single image, this act of defiant normalcy, was their first act of kintsugi. It was them picking up the first piece of their broken normalcy and saying, "This we can save." But as they returned to New York, they knew the hard part was just beginning. The public display of strength was one thing, but the private battle, the one waged in doctors' offices and in the quiet of their own fears, was a mountain that still needed to be climbed. And the first step up that mountain would involve a radical and deeply controversial plan that would test the very limits of their faith in each other, a truth about love that most of us never have the courage to face, a truth waiting for them on a mountaintop, quite literally, halfway across the world. The medical advice was standard, conservative, a regimen of medications to slow the progression, physical therapy to maintain mobility. It was a path of management, of defense. But Mark, after the initial shock had worn off, felt a fire ignite within him. He didn't just want to manage the decline, he wanted to fight it with every fiber of his being. He began researching, late into the night, falling down rabbit holes of clinical trials, alternative therapies, and cutting-edge neurology. He found a clinic in Switzerland, a place that was less a hospital and more a high-tech wellness sanctuary, specializing in a holistic, aggressive approach to neurological conditions. It combined advanced, non-invasive neural stimulation with a radical restructuring of nutrition and a brutal, daily physical regimen designed not just to maintain, but to forge new neural pathways. When he presented the idea to Kelly, her first reaction was sheer terror. Switzerland, it felt so far away, so extreme. It was the antithesis of the safe, known path their American doctors had laid out. What if it was a scam? What if it made things worse? The fear of the unknown was a heavy blanket smothering her initial hope. They had their first real blistering argument in years. It was born of fear, of love, of the sheer overwhelming weight of the choice before them. This was the cliff's edge, to trust the established, safe path, or to leap into the unknown, guided only by a desperate hope. The decision they made in the wee hours of that morning, exhausted and raw, would not only determine Mark's physical future, but would redefine the very essence of their partnership, leading them to a truth about love that most of us never have the courage to face, a truth waiting for them on a mountaintop, quite literally, halfway across the world.